And thanks to so many people showing up today.
Yeah, it's great to see that we have a quorum and so many members from the subcommittee tonight. So welcome, everyone. Today's Thursday, January 5th. The Just Transition Subcommittee of the Vermont Climate Council meeting. And we're really excited to have our first meeting in 2022. We canceled our meeting in December and we had a gathering of a meeting in November, but we didn't have a quorum. So we had some discussion in November, but not an official meeting. So it's been a while since we kind of have been together as a group. And I know we don't have everyone this evening, but we have a good number of our subcommittee members. So it's lovely to see you. So just a quick review of our agenda. So because we didn't have a quorum at our November 17th meeting, we don't have meeting minutes to approve, but we can share some discussions from anyone that wants to that occurred during that November 17th meeting. We're then going to spend a little time talking about some of the changes and updates that are happening. So lots of movement and transition within this subcommittee and within leadership. So we want to make sure we kind of create the space and make sure that everyone's on the same page about the moving parts and pieces within the council and within our subcommittee and other task groups. Then we wanted to share one of the conversations that occurred at the November meeting was about kind of clarifying and more publicly communicating the role and function and purpose of the Just Transition Subcommittee. And so Sarah and I met earlier this week and worked on a draft memo to the Climate Council to share with all of you as subcommittee members. So we'll talk through that, discuss that, as well as the biomass task group recommendations. That's another example of a way that we can engage across the Climate Council. We'll take public comment at around 5:30, and then kind of a little out of order because we have so much on the updates earlier on, we'll sort of end with Climate Council updates. So that's when we can hear from Jane and Marion and other task groups and work groups, and also have an opportunity to hear from Claire about the Public Service Department's public engagement plan that was shared in advance in the agenda materials. And then wrap up by talking briefly about what's next and planning for our next meeting. Any additions or changes to that agenda by anyone? Okay. So we've done the kind of bit of gratitude for 2020, or I guess for the holiday season. People have introduced themselves. That's great. Does anyone who participated in the conversation in November want to share what the conversations were about that might be relevant for other subcommittee members to hear? We had a great conversation, even though we couldn't consider it an official meeting. I think we had a really nice dialogue.
I have no memory, but I might not have been there. Was that the meeting at Capstone or no?
No.
After that?
Yeah, after that.
Okay, I think I may not have been there.
I don't think you were there, Sue. So it'd be hard to remember not being
Probably
there.
why the conversation was so stimulating.
Not true. Anyone feeling inclined to share anything of relevance? And if there isn't, that's fine. I don't know how Sue has ended up. Does Sue appear highlighted for all of you? No, okay, good. All right, everyone's quiet this evening.
I see Indra's hand up.
Great. Thanks, Indra.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we discussed towards the end, and we felt like that kind of connected everything that we talked about, was just this challenge of us trying to understand our role and what exactly is it that we are trying to do, and the lack of clarity within that being a major source of like frustration and things of that nature, but also like kind of like witnessing that we are moving into that direction and talking about it in every single meeting. That was the thing that we talked about towards the end.
Thanks, Indra. Yeah, I think that conversation really was the impetus for the development of this kind of memo of communicating purpose and ways that we're imagining engaging as a subcommittee going forward, because we have spent numerous conversations back to meetings, in prior to August, where we were like, what's our purpose? Who are we? What are we doing here? What's our next level charge as a subcommittee? So, yeah. Mona just added in the chat both a Happy New Year to everyone, but also heard that there's an Environmental Justice Advisory Committee being formed, but have not heard about that in this group and wondered whether we had talked about that previously.
I can speak to that, Mona. That is actually an outcome of the environmental justice legislation that passed the House. So it is a separate organization, a separate initiative, but hopefully not disconnected. And it's understandable that it would be confusing. And I think that there are, in addition to there being some new appointments from the House and maybe Senate as well to the Vermont Climate Council, there are appointments to that council that are also waiting to be done. But that is not something that we are involved with. It's literally the legislature who is going to make those recommendations. But just so you also know, there is some connection because the guiding principles that we developed early on in our important tenure are embraced within that legislation that establishes both a council and an interagency. What is that? Is that also called a council? Does anyone know? So there's the government, the folks in state government who are going to be collaborating around issues of environmental justice. And then there is this advisory council, which is external folks. Does that make sense? Is that accurate? I bet someone is better educated on that than I.
This is Jane, everybody. I'm switching to my computer right now, and I'm on my phone, but Sue, that was a great summary. And it's not dissimilar from how we're moving with climate action now too, because we have the Climate Council, and then we also have a interagency advisory board to the Climate Action Office. And so the Climate Action Office is the hub for both the sort of advisory climate council that is written in statute, and then the interagency advisory board, which is governing state action on climate, and the environmental justice office, which is also located in the secretary's office and is going to share staff with the climate office, so be very coordinated, is going to be the nexus for the environmental justice advisory council and the advisory board, interagency advisory board. And Carla and I are starting to talk a lot about how to ensure that synergies are made and we're not duplicating effort and really drawing distinctions on who's working on what. And I will say that the work of Just Transitions is very much focused on a just and equitable transition as we take action on climate. And the environmental justice law is, climate is certainly front and center in that, but it's really even broader on all environmental issues. And so, yeah, I would say they're like a year behind on where we're sort of going with the climate in the climate space, And so we're conscious not to get too far ahead of them, and conscious to sort of wait for them to catch up, but also need to keep moving. So I will say my final comment is the area where I see a lot of overlap in particular is on community engagement, and our work that we're starting to really get into, and we'll be getting into with the new facilitation and public engagement contract that focuses in on frontline and impacted communities, because that is, I think, really going to live in the environmental justice office ultimately, but yet they're not there yet. And they are going to write a community engagement plan, and climate's going to be part of it. So I think that this is a messy space a little bit, and we just have to be conscious of all that's happening and try to ensure that we're not duplicating efforts. So hopefully that's helpful and not more confusing.
Yeah, Mona, thanks for bringing up this topic, and Jane and Sue for responding.
Thank you.
I think Mona's just asking. Go ahead, Mona.
No, I said thank you very much for like your information, Sue and Jane. But I feel like did they have already contract with some community engagement, and they have been doing the community engagement for like over 3 or 5 years now? And they have a report already? This is my understanding, but I am not sure.
For the environmental justice work?
Yes.
No, well, they have you may be hearing, A&R's been finalizing our language access plan, Mona, which I imagine I hope you have been part of or seen. And that has been ongoing, and we're just about to finalize our language access plan. And that has been led by Carla, who had been serving as the part-time director of civil rights, environmental justice, and she has a really long title, and now is transitioning over to see the environmental justice office. So that language access plan has been in work for a number of years, and it's just being finalized, but not the community engagement plan yet.
Thank you.
I also am aware that DEC had that public engagement process as well that we learned about with Carrie. So there have been, Mona, a variety of different kinds of outreaches and efforts, and it's it's probably understandably very all mixed up together, but believe it or not, it's different branches or different spokes, I guess, within state government, particularly within the Agency of Natural Resources. I assume the language access plan is somewhat separate from the DEC plan, or maybe they're connected, Jane, I don't know. And did you just say that there's an environmental justice office now with Carla at the head of that? We may have lost Jane. Sorry, thanks
I think
everybody.
you may have to repeat your question. She was joining via switching between phone and computer.
Yes, I was. So I lost audio for just a little bit there.
I don't
I
want to
can hear
go
you now.
too far down this. We don't need to keep going. It was just a question about the environmental justice office and Carla. We don't need to keep going. We should probably get back on to the agenda. Thanks.
As you all talk about topics for future meetings, I think inviting Carla in she has a really good presentation on the EJ law and the EJ office, and we've been starting to coordinate on how to message like how the two offices are going to work together. So it might make sense to have Carla join a JT meeting and let folks really ask those questions.
I think that's a great idea, and I think that's a good takeaway from acknowledging that there's some partnership and collaboration, but still some confusion and misalignment. I just realized one housekeeping piece, Jane, probably before I bring you back up to talk about changes from the A&R perspective. Do we have anyone taking notes this evening? Or anyone that would like to take notes? I take some notes, but I'm not sure I can do both tonight.
Abby, this is Carrie. I can take notes, but I got here 14 minutes late. So you'll have to send me your notes.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Okay, so I think we're in this part of the agenda where we're talking about all these changes and all the updates. And so Jane, I know that we had some conversations about some of the changes that are happening in A&R. Environmental justice was a good kind of intro and segue, but do you want to offer any other changes about things that are happening at A&R relevant to the Climate Council and just transition?
Yeah, and I think this came up in the context of thinking about shifting capacities in JT and conversations that you all are going to have about bringing on more membership, what's needed, co-chair, that kind of conversation. And I just really wanted to acknowledge that the Just Transition Subcommittee is the only subcommittee that doesn't really have a, well, doesn't not, I shouldn't say doesn't really, it does not have a dedicated connection to the climate office. Like Marion and I both join you and help you to the best of our ability, but we manage a different set of responsibilities. And just want to acknowledge that the goal in the Climate Action Office is to have a programmatic expert that is sort of dedicated to each of the subcommittees, providing some administrative capacity, as well as that connection and overview to the other subcommittees, because the Climate Office itself is meeting weekly and coordinating on all the work that we're all doing. And that has been a gap. And we have a new position in the Climate Action Office called a Community Engagement and Communications Coordinator. And that position is, I'm actually negotiating with HR this week around the description, but should be posted tomorrow. And so that position will be posted tomorrow and be open for 3 weeks. I'd like to share that with all of you, if any of you know anyone who's interested, or apply. And we're also making sure that we're coordinating that with Carla, because for the Environmental Justice Office, she's hiring 2 EJ coordinators right now. And those positions are all going to really be a fundamental connection between the offices. So I just want to acknowledge, if it's felt like you guys have had the shaft and not had enough resources from the Climate Action Office, that is well felt and appreciated by us, and just hope that as we have this new person in place, that there'll be a dedicated staff person who can help support some of the work that you're all trying to advance, as well as really make that, bring the connection from Just Transitions to the Climate Office and ultimately into the Climate Council too, as we think systematically about how we're hearing from Vermonters, community engagement, what we're prioritizing and moving forward, and how we have a system of really being responsive to that. So just really wanted to highlight that, because I know in conversations with Abby and Sue, that's felt critical, and I don't think that's been made clear with all of you. And we had been sort of holding that position back because of some budget issues, and we finally can move forward. So it's a full-time FTE and permanent position in the Secretary's office. And so excited to move that forward, and I'll share the job description and posting hopefully tomorrow.
That's really exciting, Jane. It's great. And that would be different, though, than the community engagement work that would be happening out of the EJ office, out of the Environmental Justice Office. But maybe there would be positions that would be collaborating.
Yeah, they're in the planning phase. So they're like, they have a deadline that maybe others in state government remember the date, but they have to write a community engagement plan, and that's sort of like their part of their like climate action plan, like that we had to write with the council. They have to write a community engagement plan with the support of those two, the council and the board. And I don't know which one has a heavier role, in all honesty, but they have a date in the law that they have to like adopt that by. And I imagine ultimately that will help govern the work that we're doing too, and help provide critical relationships into the communities we hope to work within. But for now, we're moving forward with our community engagement strategy and plan, and also going to have that added capacity, not only through the staff, but the new contract. I should say that we've selected a contractor for the new, what was the CBI contract. We had 2 proposals only, but both were excellent. And we've selected a contractor that will focus on facilitation of the council, and then also community engagement. So it's really a marrying of 2 contracts in the past. And I can't because we're not under contract yet, we're negotiating. Had a really great conversation with that person this morning about some follow-up questions that the review committee had. But really, Claire, thanks to Claire and Marion and our former communications director, Ella Casey, who's now the chief marketing officer for the state, and then 2 climate council members, Johanna Miller and Jared Duvall. So we met as a small group, reviewed the proposals, and we're all in agreement on who to pick and move forward with. So I'm really hopeful that we have the final follow-up from the questions we had with that group. Put together a set of questions. We have those answers. I haven't shared it with the task group yet because I just got them, but they were really good. And I'm hopeful that the whole task group will agree that we can advance drafting the contract now and hopefully have it in place by the end of the month. And that has, Mona, that will have a mechanism to pay people, which I know we've been really anxious to have in place, and Mona has kept asking. So.
Jane, anything else from A&R changes side, or next we want to move to kind of changes within, excuse me, the Vermont Climate Council, and kind of the fact that we don't have Chris Campany here this evening as an example.
No others from A&R, but I will say that, yeah, Chris Campany not being here is, Chris is now no longer on the Climate Council. We have, the way the law was put in place, we had, I believe, Sue, correct me, I think it's 7 Senate appointments and 8 House appointments to make a total of 15 legislative appointments to the council. Not sure why the Senate was less than the House, but the Senate did 7 appointments and the House were 8.